a lot of fun stuff. I'll tell you one scene. 30 years ago, I directed an episode aired of Colonel Homer with Lurleen Lumpkin. Remember her?
Oh, yeah.
So, and I helped design her along with designer John Rice. And that's a rough drawing I did recently just to kind of remember this is how we did it.
Yeah.
But there was a scene where Lurleen's up on stage singing and the fans don't like her, so they're throwing things, beer bottles at her and stuff like that. And the script said a saddle is thrown on stage. And so Tuck and I both talked about it. Boy, no matter how well you draw the saddle, it's tough to read. It's a shape, and it's, we don't see them every day. So I remembered calling up Al Jean, our showrunner at that time, and saying, I keep telling him that problem. That's a tough prop. So within about 15 minutes, Al calls me back. He says, have him throw a pig on stage, a live pig. So it was Tuck again. Tuck, because of his sensibilities, he was the one that animated he said, oh, okay. And he animated the pig going up, being thrown on stage, and then scrambling and running off and stuff. And then they put a really good sound effect. It was so much better than a saddle.
Yes.
Tuck made that pig come alive. And, he didn't have to research it. He just knew, a pig would do this. So, but that was a small Tuck story. But we worked together for those very crucial years for me, and we just stayed dear friends. And so I love the guy, as did everybody.
Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week I sit down with legendary Simpsons director Mr. Mark Kirkland. Mark has directed the most Simpsons episodes of all time, and he is currently sitting at 70. We talk about how he got onto The Simpsons, some of his earliest memories. We got some Tucker stories in here, and they're pretty fun. We also talk Ollie Johnston, one of Disney's 9 old men, and so much more. Before we roll into this episode, I do want to take a quick second and send our condolences to Mark and his family. The world lost an amazing photographer, and Mark lost his hero, his dad, Douglas Kirkland. From all of us here at the What's in My Head podcast, I want to say, Mark, you're on our thoughts, and you're in our prayers. Mark, the longest, I don't want to say the longest, it's got to be, how do I word this correctly? The most directed episodes by anybody ever, Mr. Mark Kirkland. Mark, how are you, sir?
Good. Thank you, Julian.
Man.
It's a hat day, that's all. So.
It's always a hat day for me. My hair stands straight up on a consistent basis. The only way I can tame this beast is by putting a hat and telling it to sit down, man. Shout out to shout out to Sean Cashman for setting this one up. I had Tim Bailey on last night, and we started off this interview the same way we'll start off this one. Since Sean actually recommended you to come on the show, I got to imagine with you working with Sean for so long, you've got a funny story or two, or the first time you might have met Sean. But whenever you hear the name Sean Cashman, you got a story or a a story that comes to mind when you think of Sean?
Well, just a very fondness for Sean as someone who's incredibly talented, hardworking, and just a quality, supportive friend.
Yeah.
That's Sean Cashman. So, we've been industry friends besides Simpsons, where Sean worked probably 20 plus years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Worked a few years there. But I've watched him go from getting into the industry to, he's a supervising director for Disney now.
Yeah.
He's an Emmy Award winning director, and he was a former governor for the TV Academy, and actually he did it for a term, and then he recommended me, and then I did it. But we bump into each other occasionally at a coffee shop, and we always trade stories, and we consult each other really about our careers and our career paths. So, but dear friend.
That's really cool. And it's always nice to have somebody that you can really reminisce, but you can always see where you guys are going at. Somebody that's been in the trenches with you before, right? Some wartime friends. But like I said, man, I buried the lead just a little bit, man, but you've directed more episodes than any other person for The Simpsons. What is that? What does it work? What does it feel like, I guess, for working on something for so long? I mean, obviously you've left just not too long ago, but I mean, what was that feeling like starting out storyboarding, then you're directing, and then you, like I said, you've got that title as longest?
Well, one of the advantages I had was I got in early. Of course, when I joined them, David Silverman, Wes Archer, Rich Moore, they were already there as cornerstone directors. I came aboard at the end of season 1 and started working on my first episode, which aired was the 5th episode of season 2, Dance and Homer. But I was there while they were still finishing projects, and I went to Klasky Chupo to do some commercials. And while I was there, I saw Brad Bird still working on retakes for Krusty Gets Canceled. David actually did some, repair work on the episode with the babysitter, and so they were still working on season 1 when I was working there. And then, I was excited by The Simpsons when it came out. My career path where I was at that time, I had, a dozen years under my belt of various projects and studios. And when I saw The Simpsons, I said, I really like the entertainment value that it has. And I think my skill set that I have, I think I could direct one of these. And so the advantage I'm talking about is when I got hired, they hired me as a director. I had never drawn a Simpsons in my life, but they knew from my background that I had, I was capable of learning model sheets and learning a show, and they took a chance. Wes Archer and I were working together on a Levi's commercial, and Wes said, would you consider joining The Simpsons? Would you like to direct one? And I said, I would. So David Silverman came in and looked at my work and asked a few questions, and he felt satisfied to move me forward. And then I went portfolio in hand to the showrunner, who was Sam Simon at the time. And Sam looked at my work and he watched some of my animation reels including some things I've directed and produced. And he said, okay, we'll take a chance on you. And, but honestly, I was hoping for a year or two of work. Because in the freelance world I was in, going from show to show, and project to project, sometimes working in TV commercials, sometimes a 6-week job was a long job, So to get a year was like, wow, that's stability. And I was married. I had a baby myself at the time, or I should say my wife had the baby, but I had a family, and the idea of like a long gig was a good idea. And so I saw opportunity. I loved the entertainment value. But the fact that it went for 30 years is for me. I worked on Simpsons for 30 years, primarily as a director. I did do some storyboarding, often for my own episodes, but sometimes for others. But it was, it was a gift, honestly, to be connected with a series. Well, not there's only one Simpsons, so it was a gift with the Simpsons, and work on quality, shows that we do, the wonderful characters, the wonderful stories, and the wonderful crew members, my colleagues. It's been a really good, fortunate thing for me. So.
I got to imagine, man, and this came up with Tim last night. Tim just celebrated his 27th anniversary with The Simpsons. And he was talking about it. He was like, we were just talking about this today or yesterday, he said. And he was like, it's wild to think. He's like, I've seen people retire from The Simpsons. Like they're no longer doing animation. They've retired from animation and they were working on The Simpsons. That was the last thing. He was like, I started with The Simpsons. He was like, it's going to be crazy to your first job in animation. You stay with it so long because the topic came up. He's like, most people for any job, really, like my job in particular, like for cooking, for wanting to be a chef, you tend to stay in a place for a year. You gain all the knowledge you can from that chef, and either you move up the ladder or you move on to chase. You're always chasing information. You're always chasing the next step up and it's like that with every job. But cooking is just such a huge turnaround. There's not a lot of job retention, right? So in animation, you just talked about it. 6 weeks was a long time at one point in time with all the freelance work you were doing. But to sit there and say 30 years for The Simpsons, man, now this is going to sound like a dumb question, but there's a reason I'm asking it. Did it feel like 30 years? Or was it like most people say, it's like I went to sleep, I woke up, and it's 30 years later?
Kind of like that. It's
the
ripple effect. The George Irving Washington, character who fell asleep under a tree and woke up 20 years later is it's a little like that. I have good memory. I retain good, remembrances of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I particularly remember the first 5 episodes I directed, or maybe, but then it starts to get like, I remember key episodes I worked on, but then it is like a blur. And I've even sometimes started to watch a little, jump in on a piece of a Simpsons, and I'm laughing and it seems really familiar. And then I go, oh yeah, I directed this. That has happened.
That's great, man, because it always comes up, because I've asked a few of you guys, what's your favorite what's your favorite episode, and they would say, he's like, damn, did I do that one? And we'll have to hit pause and they'll go and Google it, like, oh shit, I did do that one. I directed one and I storyboarded. And he's like, I didn't realize that was my favorite one. He's like, I thought that was my friend's episode. That's why I picked that one. So it's crazy to sit here and think 30 years. It's a long time. I mean, I'll be 33 next month. So I was born the same year The Simpsons came out. And I've told this story multiple times. There was 2 shows that I was just not allowed to watch as a kid that I had to sneak around and watch. And I'm pretty sure you've heard this your entire career when you're working with The Simpsons. But the Simpsons was the one. And then my mom used the same quote. She just took the name out and changed it out. So The Simpsons and Rugrats. And the quote was, I will not have a son like that goddamn Bart Simpson, or I will not have a daughter or a son act like that goddamn Angelica Pickles. So that was the whole reason we couldn't watch those 2 shows, was those 2 characters, man. But I've sat back and I started rewatching the show from start to finish, because I've got a 12-year-old. Yeah, 12-year-old. Yeah, 12-year-old. I don't know why I said 13 earlier, but almost 13. So he's at that stage where I was at, where I started like really delving into animation and becoming a fan of this stuff, like chasing, like, who was this? Why did they do that? Oh, he worked on this show, or she worked on that show. She worked on this too. Right. So this is that inquisitive stage of my life where I was at when I started discovering all this stuff. So I've started rewatching the entire series with him, and he's watching it for the first time. And it's been fun, because my mom will come over and my mom's like, you letting him watch that dumb shit? And I was like, Mom, you'll be surprised. This Futurama King of the Hill, this is some of the smartest shows you'll ever. She's like, no, it's all stupid. It's like, Mom, you don't understand. I was like, a lot of these writers are from Harvard. A lot of these writers are from Yale, Stanford, these Ivy League schools. These are some of the smartest writing rooms, some of the smartest artists you'll ever meet. And she's like, nah, it's stupid. I was like, Mom, to be honest, to be fair, don't take this as the wrong way, but you didn't graduate high school, man. So these guys went above and beyond. These guys were smart. It's a glove, and we like to break balls. So she does it to me, I do it to her. She held me back in the 5th grade. I had to do the 5th grade twice. So it's the least I could do, is throw it out there every once in a while. But, like I said, man, so it's interesting to see and watch this with my son, because seeing him discover the show like I started to discover it around his age, it's been interesting, because I'll sit there and I'll watch myself and I look at him, and he won't know that I'm just looking at him in the side, and I was like, man, I wonder if that's what I look like watching the show. I was wondering, is that the way I thought at his age when I was watching this for the first time? So, I mean, this show, like I said, for 35 plus years now, it's touched so many lives, so many generations. It's here to stay. And like you said, it is the show. It is the series, the animated series. So, but But you said you remember those first 5 that you directed particularly. Any of those 5, when you think about the first 5 you directed, any of them stick out more than the other one?
There was a challenge to learn the show. We didn't have like a huge animation budget,
Mhm.
so we were training people. And when The Simpsons aired, it was the first primetime animated series in about 20 years. I think Hanna-Barbera, where I
Flintstone.
started, was at Hanna-Barbera. They had a series called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home. And it was with Tom Bosley. And as I recall, it went one season, but
Mhm.
it was pretty charming, actually. It was a soft kind of Tom Bosley, wonderful voice and all that. And it was kind of a gentle humor show, and it only lasted one season. And the networks had pretty much decided anything animated is only for small kids, and we're not going to put a lot of money or time invested into animation. And uh, things started to change. I was part of a group of CalArts students who were trained, and I was fortunate to get training by a few wonderful Disney veterans who had worked in the golden age of animation. And they, for not much money, went back, became teachers in their later lives, and shared with us the knowledge, of how to do animation. Problem was, there wasn't, where do you put that energy? And what happened, though, was my generation loved animation, and really it was just waiting for quality animation to come back. And when it did, uh, suddenly they couldn't get enough of it. We couldn't produce enough Simpsons. The demand was so great. And so that first year was such a challenge, tight deadlines and training people. So that was one of the challenges for someone like me and David and Wes, was to, how do you take 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds who have maybe done a little cartooning. You were lucky if they had done any animating, but some of them were just like, would draw for themselves. And how do you train them to do animation? Teach them what a storyboard is, teach people what is a layout. And then once you're in it, it's like, okay, how do you act in paper? How do you act with poses? And that was a huge learning curve for everybody, and myself too. It was a big learning curve. But so the first 5 episodes were just like, that was a year
Mhm.
of work for me. But I went from show to show to show, and by my second show, I remember I was at the Klasky Chupo building on Highland. My crew of layout artists was upstairs. I was in a downstairs office. We had an elevator, but it didn't really work very well. So 100 times a day, I was running up and down the stairs. And I remember just hanging on to finish the second episode, and I was worn out, exhausted. And I went to the doctor, who listened to my chest with a stethoscope, said, "You have walking pneumonia."
That's
So
insane.
that was a challenge. And that episode was Bart gets hit by a car. And
Yes.
the, it was a handful to put together, but that was a memorable one. My very first episode was Dancing Homer, which that we had the energy to do that. This is a cell from my first episode.
Oh, that's a beauty right there.
That's actually Bart and Homer, and you can see they gave this to me as a gift.
Mhm.
It's actually the background, so it is unique.
Oh,
There
that's
is
really cool.
that setup is a unique one. And then later, it looks like in '92, I got Matt Groening to sign it. So that's kind of cool. So
It
I just
absolutely is.
a little show and tell. But my first episode was amazing to go through that and see it on television. And my parents threw a party, and we invited everybody. And uh, Sam Simon came and joined us. Matt Groening came. and also Richard Sakai came, and my whole crew came, and David, Wes, and I'm pretty sure Rich, one of my mentors, Ken O'Connor, the legendary Disney art director, he came to the party. So, and we all sat down and watched, my first episode air. So it was like, oh my God. But I have to say, every time for our young crew, every time one of our episodes aired, almost every time we went to a party, and it was a big deal to see that. It felt like if we were athletes,
Yeah.
it was like the Super Bowl, it was like you just played in the Super Bowl. And some of the early episodes, I listened to a podcast or recording of with John Schwartzwelder, fast a writer I worked with on. I think I directed 6 of his scripts, and he had the distinction of writing the most scripts. I ended up with, for now anyway, directing the most episodes. But he was saying, like, Marge versus Itchy and Scratchy had a viewership of something like 22 million, or
Holy shit.
Huge
That's
number.
an understatement.
So when we were all that, but I don't know what numbers any of my shows got, but we had the country basically tuning in, and so it felt like, wow, this is an important. I knew it and felt it. Wow, I'm doing important work for my life, and important to me, but also like culturally important. And towards the millennium, the 2000s, I started in 1990, and by 2000, 10 years later, Time Magazine was putting together like a millennial issue, the best of the last 2,000 years. And they said that The Simpsons was the best television show ever.
If you're into anime, manga, comic books, movie reviews, or just pop culture, Spoiler Force Podcast is the place for you. Not only do I talk about nerdy topics, I have conversations with a variety of guests, such as musicians, Comic-Con artists, cosplayers, other podcasters, and people from all over the world. Join me.
That's so cool.
Crap, that's Time Magazine. 1 second.
I got to imagine you got that magazine, right?
I have a copy somewhere. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to pull it up. I was like, oh, it's show and tell again, Mark.
I have a lot of show and tell, but it felt like, wow, you're working on something that's touching people. And I do know exactly what you're saying I've watched Simpsons go from, people telling me, oh, I won't let my child watch that, to becoming a family show where, come on, Disney bought it.
Yes, it's a huge part. Like I just told you, we were just at Universal. Universal has so I'm a little sensitive to what the Simpsons did, because they took over my Back to the Future ride. Back to the Future, ladies and gentlemen, and all you nerds out there that are watching and listen to this, just listen for just a second. Back to the Future is the greatest trilogy of all time. It's not Star Wars, because Star Wars is not considered a trilogy anymore, not a true trilogy. And you can't sit here and play lawyer ball with me and say, well, the first 3 movies. No. They did 9 of them. Technically, they fall into the same trilogy. So it completely negates the fact. I piss a lot of people off every week, Mark, or every time I bring the Back to the Future trilogy being the best. But the Simpsons took over, so they turned the entire Back to the Future ride into the Simpsons ride, and it's Simpsons World right now. It's right next to Men in Black in Orlando, which is phenomenal. We go there every single time we go to Universal, because Universal is my favorite park over the two, that and Islands of Adventure. Islands of Adventure is more of the roller coasters and everything. Like the new kids like all that stuff. I like the Universal side because that's the park I grew up with. But yes, it is insane that so many of my friends, my mom too, like all of my mom's family, like we were not allowed to watch The Simpsons. And now you look around and it's like my friends watched it. So now they're watching it with their kids and I'm watching it with my kids. So it's wild to see the script kind of flip. And if people actually watched it, that's had that stance is like, no, it's a horrible show. It's bad. It's this, it's that. You have this common misconception of the show. Sit down and watch a couple episodes. The episode that hooked me in the show, I don't know if it was the first episode that I actually saw, but I'm so glad you brought it up. And I try to stay away from these topics. However, you brought this one up, Mark, so this is your fault just as much as it is mine. But Bart gets hit by a car. I believe this was the first Simpsons episode I ever saw. And Mr. Burns has actually been my favorite character of this series. Like, Mr. Burns is the guy. Like, I love everything about, like, him, Mo, they're up there. There's a few other characters that I absolutely love, whenever, like Groundskeeper Willie and Otto, those guys are up there as well. But it's Mr. Burns. I don't know what it is. It's just, he's fun to root for and he's fun to root against. He's one of those characters is like an anti-hero, because he'll do something that's so evil, yet he does something that's really nice, but he's a dick about it. So he's such a fun character. And give me 1 second. So like I said, I believe that was the first episode of The Simpsons. That's the first one that at least registers when I think about The Simpsons. So with that being one of the ones that you absolutely remember being in the first 5 you did, Dancing Homer was up there too. We just, like I said, we're starting to rewatch it. So we're at I think we're on season 4 now, but so that one's pretty fresh in my head too. But Miss Bar gets hit by a car, man. I mean, what is this one, or how does this one rank towards all the 5 that you remember? I know you said you were specifically remember the first 5, but where does this one rank?
Actually, quality wise, I mean, I have to say the writing was outstanding,
Mm-hmm.
and the voice acting outstanding. My directing, it was shaky. I was exhausted from
Yeah.
day, and I could have done a better job. It felt patched together, and yet out of it, probably because the material that I was working with was so damn good, it still ended up being kind of classic in its own way. Even funny lines like "Take me, I am old," that's still like, I have a daughter who I was the first director really with a child, and
Mm-hmm.
she was a baby about, right about the time The Simpsons came out, and hope she doesn't mind me talking about her, but she and I laugh still to this day, and we'll talk about, "Take me, I'm old," or "The bees are on the what now." I mean, those lines from the shows, we'll still play those to each other, and we still laugh at those situations. The quality, though, inched up. My team got better and stronger. My directing got better. We were always like swapping people out, and people would move. People would come and go. And animation wise, we tried to keep the strongest people as a team that we could. But the team, everybody learned their jobs better, and we would regroup all the time, and the quality inched upwards. But even by my last episode of my first season was a War of the Simpsons, where Homer catches the catfish and stuff, and it came back looking really good, right out of the can. It was pretty strong, and I had really good team of people. My friend Tuck Tucker, I have to sadly say the late Tuck Tucker.
Yes, unfortunately, yeah.
He I brought him onto The Simpsons. I had worked with him before, and he was one of my top animators.
Mm-hmm.
And but I would give him really almost slapsticky scenes, a little bit like Homer, with the oar pounding on the fish, trying to kill the fish, stuff like that. And Buck was from West Virginia, so he had kind of a country boy enthusiasm about fishing and stuff like that. So he was perfectly cast for doing stuff with Homer like that. And so his animation just sparkled. And but everybody really, the cool thing about The Simpsons for the animators was, now I likened it like when you were trained to be a Disney animator, and I went to school with a lot of people who became Disney artists, and I have incredible respect for that training, and I love it. But you're trained to be like in an orchestra and play in pitch and in rhythm and time. When you worked on this, it felt like those big, massive features they did. I would imagine of my friends that I would talk to, it sounded like they were orchestra players. You had to be really good at what you do and very professional. And when you when I think of the early Simpsons days, I think more like we were a jazz ensemble, and you had to be good, but there was lots of solo opportunities if you wanted to solo and do stuff, and a lot of our animators really did shine. Whether you were an animator or a background artist, there was opportunities to get a piece and make it yours on the show. It would all be collectively part of the show, but the talent that went through, and that's what I enjoyed about The Simpsons. We worked as hard as any animation team.
Absolutely.
And the animators still do. The Simpsons people still work incredibly hard to provide, what is The Simpsons. But that was the experience. But yeah, I did the one where Homer tries to date. No, Homer sets up a Skinner.
Yeah, with Skinner. Yeah.
And everything goes wrong. And I later found out while I was doing it that the writers considered it almost an experiment to let's take a secondary character not in the family and give them a major storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And so they saw it as kind of an experiment, and but it turned out hilarious, and their timing was so good that they released it, I think, on Valentine's Day. And Principal Charming, that's what the name. But that was a lot of fun to work on. And gosh, you reminded me. I'd have to dig through, but I have a storyboard from Principal Charming with Matt's and Sam Simon's notes in it back to me. And
that's really cool.
The show was written way too long, and we got an edict that we needed to cut all the shows down. And it was really fascinating to work on that episode because that was the one I got a call from Sam Simon saying, "What do you think we should cut?" And meanwhile, we had laid out half the show, and I'm like, I can't even see the forest from the trees at this point. But they made some edits and cuts, and combining. Okay, these are two different characters. We'll combine them down to one character doing this, and it was fascinating to watch our showrunner at the time, Sam Simon, watch him story edit while doing the show. That was really fascinating to see, and it was interesting to see Matt Groening's where he found humor and gentle humor and stuff that I really liked, cartoon humor that he would put into the show. And it was interesting to see the drawings that Matt would do and contribute. So really, really an education for me. So
absolutely, man. There's a couple things I want to circle back to, and I've done this a few times, and Tuck Tuckers actually came up. I've got Craig Bartlett, the creator of Hey Arnold, coming on down the road, and he's a big driving force for Hey Arnold. He did a lot of Nickelodeon stuff towards the end of his life. And
Craig and I go back, and
yeah,
helped him get a job once.
Really?
For Hey Arnold, he had just moved down. We were friends, my wife and I at the time. My wife at the time and I were friends with Lisa and Craig, and they had moved down from Oregon, and I knew Craig needed work, and I was working for someone, and I landed him a job that landed a number of months. So we were good, very good friends. Yeah, still are. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to that chat because he's going to come on in the fall. He's busy right now with a couple things he's working on. Hey Arnold was very transformative is not the right word. I can't think. Maybe it is transform. I don't know. It was a very huge part of a very dark time in my life as a little kid. Dad had just went to prison, a few years prior. I was very young. My mom and my dad got a divorce. So we were going through some real shit back then. And I just didn't know. And I see Hey Arnold and I see this character that is always positive, regardless of what happened. Like he lost his parents. You find out he finds his parents in the Jungle movie. I'm so glad they finally got to wrap up the story the way Craig wanted to. But I don't want to put words in his mouth. Maybe he's got some more stories to tell with Arnold and his cast of crew. But it felt like it was wrapping it up in a pretty good way with the Jungle movie. But getting to see that character and that show, and the music was great, the animation was phenomenal, like the characters, it was such a fun show from start to finish. But Tuck Tucker was a big part of that, as well as a lot of other Nickelodeon shows. And I've done this with a few times, and like I said, it's happened with Tuck Tucker. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Dave Cummings, because Cunningham. Yeah, Dave Cunningham. He's the supervising director for the Patrick Star Show over at Nickelodeon, and Tuck Tucker came up. So whenever somebody's no longer here, the best thing we can do is to immortalize them by telling a story. What is your favorite Tuck Tucker story? I think Dave told me the one, like Tuck was a very big trickster when he would work on him. So his favorite holiday was April Fool's. So I think he had taken the back when they had phones and receivers and shit. So he took honey and put honey on the receiver end. So he called Dave a couple times, and it kept sticking to his face. I believe that was the story, Dave. But what's your favorite Tuck Tucker story? I got to imagine you've had a few.
I got a few, and I wish I should think about it more. But off the top of my head, I hired Tuck twice.
Mm-hmm.
Before Simpsons, I hired him onto a crew, and what was interesting, this is just kind of an observational thing. I was looking at a lot of portfolios for a project to hire him onto. It was a Disney project. And I was working for a company, and you're in Florida. So do you remember the MGM studio tour?
I do. And it's come up quite a few times. And I wonder if that was the artist I saw, because I wanted to be an animator when I was younger. They were rolling out SpongeBob. I see a lone animator down there. He's tearing stuff down, balling it up, and throwing it over his shoulder. I asked the lady that's giving the tour, why does he keep doing that? And she's like, well, if it's not on model, or if it's not the way it's supposed to be, he has to start all over. So I would just see this guy tear it, and it completely crushed every dream I had ever had as an animator, because I was like, well, I keep all of my drawings. I don't throw them away. So if I have to do that, I'm not going to be an animator. I gave up on my very young dream, seeing that animator, that artist tear shit down, ball it up, and throw it over his shoulder. I wonder if it was Tuck. So.
My point was that I worked for the company. The producer's name was Bob Rogers. He has a company called BRC Imagination Arts. It's a great company. You can look that up. But I was hired as the animation producer to make the films that were shown in that pavilion. And Tuck Tucker was an animator, actually an assistant animator I hired. And I was looking at like lots of portfolios, and I saw this one portfolio. It wasn't very good. And what was really strange about it was I could see some drawing in there, but every character had a head turned away or a bag over a head, and there was no head drawings in the portfolio. And so I dismissed it. And then we were kind of getting desperate for the cleanup animation. This was a little film called Back to Neverland with Robin Williams and Walter Cronkite, and a beautiful film. And Jerry Reese was our director of Brave Little Toaster fame. Someone you should probably talk to for sure. And but I was in charge of hiring the crew, and we really needed some help. And one of the crew members, Don Parmalee, came up to me and he said, I know his portfolio isn't good, but this guy is really good. You should hire him. So I said, okay, I'll take a chance and I'll make a quick decision. And like if he doesn't work out, he's out. But I hired Tuck on. He came in, and I think within a half hour of him on the job, I went by his desk and I looked down at the drawing he did, the very first, and it was a head drawing of the Robin Williams character. And it was perfectly on model. And I said, okay, you're good. So we loved his enthusiasm. And I stayed with the company after the project was done and did a second project for Japanese World's Fair. And Tuck became one of my lead animators. So I worked with Tuck, and we worked in storyboarding and comedy. And he was really good at coming up with fun ideas and very enthusiastic. And then when I went over to The Simpsons, once I got the job as a director over there, again, we were hungry for people. And I said, you got to hire this guy. So we hired Tuck. And then they said, okay, he's on your team. And so I gave him, a lot of fun stuff. I'll tell you one scene. 30 years ago, I directed an episode aired of Colonel Homer with Lurleen Lumpkin. Remember her?
Oh yeah.
So, and I helped design her along with designer John Rice. And that's a rough drawing I did recently just to kind of remember this is how we did it.
Yeah.
But there was a scene where Lurleen's up on stage singing and the fans don't like her. So they're throwing things, beer bottles at her and stuff like that. And the script said a saddle is thrown on stage. And so Tuck and I both talked about it. Boy, no matter how well you draw the saddle, it's tough to read. It's a shape, and it's we don't see them every day. So I remembered calling up Al Jean, our showrunner, at that time, and saying, I keep telling him that problem. That's a tough prop. So within about 15 minutes, Al calls me back. He says, have him throw a pig on stage, a live pig. So it was Tuck again. Tuck, because of his sensibilities, he was the one that animated the piece. He said, oh, okay. And he animated the pig going up, being thrown on stage, and then scrambling and running off and stuff. And then they put a really good sound effect. It was so much better than a saddle.
Yes.
Tuck made that pig come alive, and he didn't have to research it. He just knew, oh, a pig would do this. So, but that was a small Tuck story. But we worked together for those very crucial years for me, and we just stayed dear friends. And so I love the guy, as did everybody.
I've never heard anybody say anything bad about him. It's doing this podcast, it's come up a few times. Robin Williams is my favorite actor of all time. He passed away very close to my birthday, so whenever it comes up, it's just like, fuck, man. I remember laying on the couch. I was sleeping. I was still in the Navy. I was in Norfolk, Virginia. I was still in the Navy, and I was taking a nap. I wake up, turn on the TV, and for some reason the news was on. I never have the news on, right? Never watch the news because it's depressing enough turning on the news, and it just happened to be on, and it said Robin Williams found dead, and I was like, this is a nightmare. This is a dream. I'm still sleeping. I didn't wake up. This can't be real. And then as it set in that I was actually up, I just remember crying fucking crazy. And so, him being my favorite actor, and then hearing stories like these, whenever I can bring up, or whenever a name comes up that's no longer here that was so loved, like Robin, like Tuck, James Avery came up to Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. He was also the voice of the original Shredder from the 1987 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I'm a huge Ninja Turtle fan, and I flubbed that one up, Mark. We'll fix that shit in post, as you guys like to say. So it's whenever I get to hear those stories, I really appreciate it. So thank you for sharing that with me. We're getting towards the end of this episode, so I'd like to rotate into some fans' questions. However, I've had a real blast chatting with you. There's no way in hell that we could scratch the surface in 1 hour, let alone 30 hours for the 30 years you've done. So I'd love to have you back on whenever you got some free time, man. I'd love to have you back on for another episode if you're up for it. So there's a couple questions we like to ask before we get to the fans' questions. These were always fun. So your Mount Rushmore. So you have 4 people plus 1 of inspirations. They can be animators, they can be illustrators, I've had Van Halen come up, I've had people's wives come up as inspirations. So it doesn't have to be just animators or illustrators, but you get 4 people plus 1. So are there on your Mount Rushmore? If you could do all animators, that'd be cool, but you don't have to. Who would be on your Mount Rushmore?
Well, this may seem funny and odd, but how about Laurel and Hardy? Count them.
That's up there. Yeah.
Laurel, count them as one. As a child, my father is a photographer, Douglas Kirkland. I recommend people look up his body of work. It's incredible.
Okay.
When I was a 13-year-old, he bought me a Super 8 camera.
Mm-hmm.
In that era, those cameras were silent, but I wanted to make comedies, and I did with that camera, and they had to be silent. So I kind of strangely, I had to go through learning how to tell a story visually, but I would set my alarm clock for 1 a.m. for television, because this is before DVDs and tape or any of that stuff. And if I would check weekly the newspaper and see a Laurel and Hardy was playing at 1 a.m, I would set the alarm, get up, and watch a Laurel and Hardy short. But I love the comedy, and I love to laugh, and so that was a big, huge Stan Laurel's comedy and Oliver Hardy's acting. It was really good. Now, I was so fortunate with The Simpsons when I got there. David Silverman particularly would point out, think of Homer as like an Oliver Hardy, that he's a big guy, but he gets very delicate with his fingers, like Oliver Hardy did. So when David would refer to that stuff, I was like right on board. Like, I love it. I love the gag structures and stuff like that. So definitely Laurel and Hardy.
So you got 3 more, and then an honorable mention.
I would say Walt Disney and staff.
Yeah.
For and a lot of the dear friends that I've made with the Golden Age animators, and their, what they trained me to do. It's drawing for entertainment is what they taught me to do. And so that whole, when I was a teenager, thinking if I could have any job in the world, one would have been, I would have loved to have worked on the Hal Roach comedy lot, work on comedy. And then the other place was, I would have loved to have worked at Disney in the 30s on maybe Silly Symphonies, or, just the Old Mill or something like that. Those guys. Yeah. Mark Davis. Yeah.
He's always been my favorite of the 9 old men. It's just,
that's a Mark Davis original.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Like, just looking at his stuff and then seeing that's Bambi
on ice. Yeah.
Wow.
And I met Mark Davis, and
Did you get to learn from him in school? I know you said you went to Cal Arts and you had a lot of the Golden Age animators.
I attended. I'll show you something else. I attended a couple of lectures he gave, and I learned a lot from his lectures. Now this is a dear friend this is a photograph I took of Ken O'Connor, and he was the master layout artist, art director. He was an art director on Snow White.
Mm-hmm.
He came up with the witch climbing the mountain.
Yes.
The art director, and a lot of layouts on the Dance of the Hours, ostrich scenes, Pinocchio. He worked on hundreds of shorts.
Mm-hmm.
But he worked on Lady and the Tramp and Peter Pan, and came up with Skull Rock for Peter and Pan. And so incredible. Mars and Beyond with Ward Kimball, worked on those. So he was a big, huge influence. I'm lumping all my Disney dear friends who influenced me and helped me with my drawing, those guys. And it's not just drawing, it's drawing for entertainment. Mm-hmm. And it's different from other kinds of drawing. So they're another one. And now I have to name more people.
I think we're on one more. Your honorable mention.
Honorable mention of who has inspired me. Well, certainly I'll say my father. I think of my dad, and again, he always has had my back. He was always an inspiration. His love of his craft, photography, and he has photographed a lot of people in entertainment, including Robin Williams, including Walt Disney. My dad photographed Disney. So people look up Douglas Kirkland photography and look at images of what my dad's done. And I used to work for my dad as an assistant, so I learned how to work from my dad. So, I can't be grateful enough for what Dad has done and his enthusiasm for what I've done. If I get one more, back to the Disney guys, my friendship with Ollie Johnston, the animator. I'm going to show you guys a drawing. Eat your hearts out. This is an original. This is the flour sack exercise that the Disney guys did.
Oh, and his Illusions of Life book.
Yeah, this is an original charcoal drawing of that was given to me by the Johnston family. But
That is so cool.
so my time spent with Ollie, and by the way, the desk behind me right here, this desk was Ollie's, and
Get the fuck out of here, Mark. That is so cool.
And it was really my friendship with Ollie that I treasure, that I knew Frank and Ollie, but I particularly was close to Ollie, spent a lot of time with him and talking about animation and so big influences right there for me, people that have changed my life in a positive way. So
that's really cool, man. And thank you for sharing the photos. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just listening, you're for sure going to want to go and check out the video so you can see the very cool things that Marcus showed us. Plus the desk alone, man, I got to imagine just inspiration alone, just sitting in that desk feeling, fuck, dude, this is probably where he did every movie that I ever grew up on from start to finish, man. So I got to imagine that feels pretty cool too.
A couple different ones, but this was his at-home desk. Yeah, he did scenes from Rescuers on that. But the desk was built right after Snow White. It's a Kim Weber desk, and it was built in the 30s. And he and Frank each took one of these home. But yeah, my friendship with Ollie. I see a picture of Ollie that I took, the black and white one back there. That's Ollie, and that's me with Ken O'Connor, and then right there, that's me and Ollie. But those are very important to me. And then I got a picture of me and Dad together. You got to see this. It's my dad and I. Before the pandemic, we would go to coffee shops and talk about photography, and
it's so cool.
So that's Douglas Kirkland, and he knew people like Stanley Kubrick, and he worked at Look magazine. He was very, very famous for the photography he has done and continues to do. So, but that's Dad. So.
That's so cool, man. Thank you for sharing these stories with us, man, and these photos. The next one is always fun. So a lot of fans that listen to this are either trying to break into the animation field or already in the animation field. So what are 2 books that you would recommend every fan of animation or every person trying to break into animation should have on their shelves?
Yeah, on my shelf. Okay. You held up one already, but
yes.
You could only have one.
Oh.
This is one right there. The
Absolutely.
Illusion by Frank and Ollie. So it's so dense. We call this book the Bible.
Yes.
In the animation world. There was a time when this book, when the Disney feature department was doing 2 features a year, they had 2 units. The animators wanted the original edition because the plates were better, clearer. They had lost all the master plates, and on reprints, they had made copies of a copy. So the clear first editions were in great demand, and they were going for upwards of $500 a copy. Well, you can now, things have changed. I've picked them up for $35 on eBay, and I've given out a few copies of The Illusion of Life to friends and colleagues. So that's one right there. I would say that book, and then follow up book number 2, any of the other 7 books that Frank and Ollie wrote. So right there, those are great books.
Absolutely.
Into animation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Great recommendations. And this is our last recommendation before we get to the fans. This is how you came on the show, because Sean, you were Sean's animation recommendation, you and Tim Bailey. So if you had somebody out there that you've worked with that you would think would have a great time on this show, who was your animation recommendation? Who should we reach out to, Mark?
Great question.
I think you had mentioned Jerry Reese, Brave Little Toaster.
Call up Jerry Reese.
Yeah.
Jerry Reese. Yeah.
Write his name down. We'll see if we can't get him on.
Very
All right.
incredibly talented. He was part of Disney. We're colleagues in age wise. We're the same age, but he went to Disney along with John Musker and good friends. But he would have a lot of rich stories.
Beautiful.
Another friend, I think he's such a good storyteller, and he's younger but done a lot of really good work, is Gavin Freitas.
Oh yes, I've been chatting with him. We haven't been able to get our schedules to line up just yet, but we are working on getting him on. So it's been very, very hectic. I don't know what I was thinking when we had a 1-year-old now, but it's just like, man, I'm gonna have so much free time. I forgot like how much work a baby takes, right? So it really takes a village to raise a kid, and they could not be farther from the truth, man. So we're gonna rotate in the fans' questions here, and we got a couple here, and they're some really good ones. Scotty Wood wants to know, what are some differences in the production between directing your first episode to the most recent episode you directed?
Budgets are, when I started, the budgets were much smaller, and so we can have more artists. We have technology is different. When I started on The Simpsons, and for 20 years on The Simpsons, everything was done on paper and with a disc like this, and we were drawing and flipping the same way they did Steamboat Willie and Bugs Bunny, and Mickey Mouse. But now today it's technology with we still have to draw organically. We still draw, but we're on a Cintiq or a Wacom tablet, and everything is a digital file, and everything's put together digitally. But when I started on The Simpsons, it was paper, pencils, cameras with film, and everything is now, computer heavy now. But we still have to draw. You still have to know how to draw, and you still have to think. The comedy thinking has not changed.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same. So
budgets for sure.
That's the big difference. Yeah.
Beautiful. BG Big Max wants to know. Said, can you ask him what are some of more of the obscure Simpson characters he liked to use, like Bumblebee Man, Dr. Nick, and so on? Was there some obscure characters or secondary characters that you absolutely loved working with?
Yeah. For instance, you mentioned Groundskeeper Willie.
Yes.
He first appeared in one of my episodes.
Really?
Groundskeeper Willie did. Anything Phil Hartman did. I directed his the first episode he was in, and he was Lionel Hutz, and then he also played the washed-up movie star. You help me with the Troy McClure.
I was about to say, if we don't get it, it's going to hit as soon as we hit end, and then I'm going to feel really pumped.
But I directed the last episode Troy McClure did. I loved working with Troy McClure. I also directed the first episode with Hans Moleman. And it's funny about both Hans Moleman and with Groundskeeper Willie. At I think his very first episode, he yells, "You ain't seen the last of old Willie." And it's like threatening Bart or something like that. And Sam Simon was in the room with the writers when we were watching the animatic, and they were all laughing, saying, "Goodbye, old Willie," like as if we would never see him again. But then the writers found he was such a rich character, they wrote him over and over. Now he's just standard. He's a classic. But so we never thought we'd see him again. Also, Hans Moleman. Boy, Matt, I hate to, Matt, I love his sensibilities, but the first time he saw Hans Moleman, I believe it was when it was in the Patty and Selma show, Principal Charming, when he was applying for a driver's license. Mm-hmm. And we used this down camera angle, and we wanted him to be this pathetic guy. And he had that little the little voice, the little weak voice, and Patty and Selma just pounded on him. But somehow his skin color and his size, Matt Groening looked at him and he said, "What the hell's with this character?" And he was like, "Let's not do another guy like that, okay?" And yet again, he was so damn funny that, and the writers could do so much with him. He kept reappearing and reappearing, but always getting like the electric chair or driving a truck that blew up or something. He was always like a bad luck character. So he was kind of fun to work with, but I loved all the characters. I loved Homer. I love his character, just pure and simple. But I love Marge, and I love the adults and their problems. But Bart, all the stuff we were talking about earlier about a lot of people not wanting their kids to emulate and be like, I don't blame them. I don't blame that. You don't want someone behaving like Bart. And the other thing that's kind of funny is The Simpsons on TV is funny. Mm-hmm. I had a friend say this to me once, because I was referring to someone who was doing something stupid in my house, and they said, "Yeah, The Simpsons on TV is Homer on TV is funny. Homer in your living room is not." But yes, there you go. I don't know if I roundabout. I don't know if I gave you the answers you want, but
that you crushed it on that one, man. Like I said, the next time you'll be on, because this one was a lot of fun, but I can't wait to do this again because I've already got some stuff that I've written down that I intentionally knew we would get into the weeds on. I've the last couple weeks of the podcast, last couple months really, has been extremely Disney heavy. When I started this, it was Cartoon Network heavy for the first year. I did some Nickelodeon stuff here and there. This year I've been focusing a lot on Disney because that was the first really animated movie. I mean, my favorite animated movie of all time is The Iron Giant. Brad Bird is a phenomenal director. He is up there. Like if I've got a Mount Rushmore of directors, man, he is up there for sure. Ratatouille as well, The Incredibles. So it's been very Disney heavy the last few months. But after the last couple of weeks, it's starting to turn in real Simpsons heavy. And I've had a lot of fun talking with you guys, but I've got a lot of stuff written down here for when the next time you come on, because I knew specifically when you brought up Cal Arts and you brought up the Disney folks a couple times, and you brought up Ollie and Frank and a few other guys, that we would get lost in the weeds for the Disney talk. So I can't wait to have you back on to talk about that again. So, Mark, where can people find you if they want to say, "Hey, Mark, I really like what you did"? How can they come by and say hi? Not to your house, of course, just on the social media side. Are you on social media at all?
I have an Instagram. Now, this is an odd thing. Mark K 1914. Mm-hmm. And you're going to go on there and you're going to see fine art and drawing. And that's what I do for a hobby. Somebody wants to, friend me or something like that. That's fine. So
beautiful. And all of those links for your social media pages will be in the description, so people can just click and go straight to it. That way they don't have to Google it. Because let's be honest, Mark, a lot of people, myself included, are very lazy. If you say, "Hey, just look it up, just Google it," like, nah, I don't want to do it. But if you give them a link, no problem, because it's easy to just click and go. So all those descriptions, I'll get all those links from you that you want in the description of the video, and we'll put them in there. But Mark, like I said, this has been a real blast. I never know what I'm going to get from these conversations, but this one has been a real treat for me, man. I hope you had fun, because I know I did too, just getting to hear your process and how you broke down, and getting to talk to the guy that probably started, my fandom for The Simpsons with Bart gets hit by a car. And I get to sit across the screen from you for a little bit over an hour, man. So like I said, this has been a real blast for me, and I can't wait to do part 2, and probably would be on part 72 before we even wrap up the first 10 years of your career, man. Because like I said, you've done a lot. Just to boil it down into a very simple sentence, you've done a lot of very cool shit in your lifetime, Mark. And I'm so happy you came on the show to talk to me about it.
Well, thank you very much, and fun questions. So very, very nice.
And there's going to be a lot more of fans' questions next time, because I promise you, man, I've already started to see my phone light up here. So the next time we come on, I've already got a list started here on my little yellow legal pad. And it's not yellow because of The Simpsons. It's just I like these yellow legal pads, man. So, I got to wear a yellow shirt too. But nonetheless, man, he's been Mark. I've been Julian. This has been the What's in My Head podcast. And this has been another piece, and a very huge piece, of your childhood. Good night. My guest next week is Disney co-director of Beauty and the Beast, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, in Atlantis: The Lost Empire, Mr. Gary Truesdale. Enjoy the teaser. Man's questions, man. When you think of Beauty and the Beast, man, is there a scene or a image or a song or any part in this movie where you think defines this movie?
I mean, for me, it's got to be the ballroom, you know, and it's there's a couple of reasons I say this. I mean, one of them is, you know, because this is what everything in the movie is leading up to, you know, all the story, the character arcs, the emotion, the color, you know, everything is leading to this scene. Then you open the door and it's, you know, one of Disney's first like full CG environments. It's moving around and James doing, you know, the characters dancing in 3D. And yeah, I mean, plus Angela's song, holy smokes, you know, it all came together, it all worked. And to have something like fire off on all cylinders, like exactly the way it's supposed to and better, yeah, that's something you can hope for, but you know, like you said earlier, it's like you don't know, you know. Yeah. We didn't know what we had. We were hoping, but yeah, that's the one that came together. And then the other reason I like that one, there was a Disney, I don't know if they still do this or not, I'm sure they do, but they do test screenings with like test audiences, recruited audiences, and we'll go out to a theater somewhere. And Kirk and I, since, you know, we're just like cartoon guys, we are not recognizable to the public, you know. We just like walk into the theater and we just like sit down, you know, and so there's like people all around us, so we're like kind of seeing what the reactions are. And the scene when the Beast comes out at the top of the stairs and he's wearing, you know, that blue coat, you know, and the door across from him opens up and Belle steps out in her yellow ball gown, and there were like people were like, you know, whistling and like woo, and there's this girl sitting right behind Kirk and myself. She was probably like 18 or 19, and we could hear her go, "She's just a cartoon." And we were like, ooh, I tell you, a tough crowd. Ooh. And
Rodney Dangerfield, that's the first time it's been done on this show. Thank you, Gary. I appreciate it.
And so, you know, we go through the opening song at the table, and then they go into the ballroom. And the doors open up, and the you know, the digital ballroom comes on, and Kirk and I heard this girl go, holy shit. And we went, yeah, we got her.